Hey, it's Bart with the Scotch Test Dummies, and I'm obviously here solo. Scott is not here, and I'm doing something a little bit different. So Roy Duff, Aquavitae, does these wheelie bin reviews where he's got them all in his recycle bin, and he's just sampling that last little drop that's in there. And I love that format, Roy. Way to go. Boom, boom, boom. But I was about ready to pour the last dram from this Finnish distillery, and I'll probably get the pronunciation wrong, Teerenpeli, and in particular, their Kaski single malt whiskey. I love this. I had this with Scott, held onto the bottle, and just kept going back and back and back. So that doesn't happen all the time. And when it does, I'm going to save the last dram and I'll bring it back on, and I'll do that with you here so that you can kind of experience, one, it sometimes, this one not so much, but sometimes a dram will change over the course of its bottle. We got to do the whole thing. See, if it was just me, I would have stretched that into 2. I wasn't sure, but that looks like a 1 ounce pour, maybe a little heavy. But I wanted to taste and wrap up and kind of share what caught me with a particular bottle. So, first thing, I can smell it already. It's got these, I just got it again. It's like a citrus honeyed vanilla that's coming up out of the glass, even to my nose now. So it's got a very nice, sweet, I'm salivating, honey, vanilla, floral essence to it that's just fabulous. The other thing is, I don't mind this with water, but I've been preferring it neat. So throughout most of my pours, every once in a while, again, I'll still throw in a little water or something. But neat, this just hits the spot. And there was some history here too. So this is, sorry, we'll get into that in a second, but this is 43% ABV. It is a 750 milliliter bottle. Thank you. Yes. Their descriptions are rich, malty, and unique sweet single malt whiskey aged in ex-sherry casks. So you got a lot of things going on with this. So we've got the honey. And when you come in, you get just a little hint. I get a little hint of either barrel char or peat. And this was the first bottle I've ever had from this distiller. So those notes still stay in there. I get a little bit of a dusty oak there. When I'm right up with my nose in there, I don't get as many vanilla honey notes. It's more that oak. There's a little bit of vanilla and still those touches of maybe peat or maybe just barrel char, but delicious. So the very first taste, I get a nice velvety mouthfeel, but the flavor is kind of sitting in the back. And I'm going to have to come back and see if I can get it. Get the burst of sweetness mid-palate. And then in the finish is where there's a lot of honeys and vanillas coming through. There's like a little tiny spark or hint of, again, the peat or maybe barrel char, so that's a nice carry through from the nose. The finish doesn't seem very long. And if anything, it's probably some of the oak that lasts throughout this. So, one of the reasons I kept coming back to this is what I usually have upstairs is I'll have generally a bourbon, some kind of bourbon up there, and then I'll usually have a single malt. And I tend to want a single malt Scotch barley-ish dram later at night. I don't know why. And then during the weekends, or especially when it's hot, I'll love the bourbons, usually with a cube. But I kept coming back to this. I think because of these subtle peats that are in there. And it may not even have some peats. I don't actually get a lot of the sherries, which is what I expected, but maybe that's some of those fruitier floral notes that I get. Part of what was pleasant was from dram to dram, I felt like I could puzzle out new things as I went. So Scott and I have been doing this show for 10 years now. And let's just look at it from the quantity side. Having done so many reviews and so many different styles of whiskey and covering multiple continents and styles within those continents sometimes. And when something kind of rises to the top, I'm like, okay, sometimes I don't even know why. Because whiskey, my impression in general is whiskey is generally always good. It is the far, far, far rare exception that I get something that I go, ugh. I mean, that just generally doesn't happen. Whiskey's almost always hitting this like, oh, that's good. So then it becomes, wow, it's popped up here. Now, for you folks watching, when Scott and I are together and we both converge and both like it, that tells you something. Otherwise, it's way more important to just kind of say, well, I like Bart's palate, or Bart's palate is way, way flipped, 180 degrees from what I like. And then you might want to go after stuff I don't like. So that's the value. But it's still even a pleasant noser. So when something sticks around, or goes upstairs, I should say, because I can't say it sticks around. When something goes upstairs and then just starts to get destroyed, it's because multiple things are calling back to me. This is one of those noses that I could just sit while I watched a movie or was reading. I'll read upstairs a lot of times when I get home from work and just kind of calm my brain. And I can just nose something without even sipping from it. And this brings these interesting noses where right here I'm getting a little bit of spice entangled with the wood. And it's like I've pushed past the sweeter vanilla honey notes. And I can get in a little bit more of, like I said, the spice. I got a little bit of cream there, so it's always kind of changing up a little bit. Something else I will do is instead of adding any, I'll drink this one. I drank most of this one neat, but I'll let saliva build up in my mouth and take a smaller sip. And then sometimes almost like, I'm starting to salivate now because the sweetness was getting to me, but I'll play with the dilution inside my mouth. So when you control the sip and the saliva, you can still play with dilution on a very small, like micro way that's really kind of fun and interesting. Now, the part where I've come home from work, I'm not doing this in a way that it would be, one, we've already reviewed the bottle, so it's not like I'm trying to break down key notes. Scott and I have gotten really good about just doing that on the show. And part of it is kind of being present. So as I spend time with a dram that's caught my attention, I'm just really being really present with it. And it's almost meditative, if that makes sense. So when I bring one of these in for the last dram, I think that's what I'll call it, the last dram review, it's because something with that bottle has struck me in almost like a meditative way. And it's still the light smokes I get here. I just got a rising dough with, again, I can't necessarily say it's a peat smoke, but it almost feels like a nice, subtle, soft peat smoke. Could just be barrel char. Maybe a touch of dunnage even in there, like old wood. And this dram hits me both on the nosing, which doesn't always happen, which is why I think I kept going to it. And then the fact that the flavors, I'm getting the peat again in the finish, draw the notes I picked up right into the flavor palette, with some extra little things, because now I'm getting, again, fruit and honey and spice. So what I will say the value of this may be is this doesn't happen to me often. Sometimes I even get in trouble with Scott because he'll come over and say, oh, I've got a little Roy Duff amount in there. He'll come over and say, hey, where's that Kaski? And I'll be like, gone. He'll be like, what? You got all this and you killed that? I'm like, gone forever, gone. I would love to try more things from Teerenpeli. Let me see what I can read. So it's both a brewery and a distillery. That's interesting because a lot of times I love when, beer is aged in a whiskey barrel and vice versa. Whiskey is aging in something that's had some kind of beer, stout, or whatever in it. So there could be some fun things going on there. It says craft distiller's choice. My passion for the use of natural and local ingredients in beverage production started with our Teerenpeli brewery in 1995. That's the same year I started on the police department here in Wichita. So I like this. So you're hearing there's a passion for the natural and local ingredients. So very cool. The brewery location was perfect, above a limitless pure water reserve and surrounded by barley fields. God, does that sound great. He says, founding the Teerenpeli Distillery in 2002 was a crazy challenge, and I was advised many times not to do it. For me, this only, quote, added spirit into the flames, end quote, and I just kept on going. The beginning was nerve-wracking, knowing it would take many years before we knew what this final product would taste like. Well, thank you, sir, for doing it. After all these years, I'm very proud to present this product to you. It is just how I wanted it to be, distilled with carefully selected raw materials, renewable energy, and great spirit. Kaski. So that is interesting because thank you for that work you did, sir, because this has been a fabulous, fabulous dram. Scotch it, you Scotch gods. Slaunch it, Dummies.